Cepher Commentaries, Genesis chapter 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. Neither shall your name any more be called Abram, but your name shall be Avraham. For a father of many nations have I made you, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come out of you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and to your seed after you. And I will give to you and to your seed after you at the land wherein you are a stranger, at all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. Okay, so let's begin with this paragraph, because this is the Avrahamic covenant. And this Avrahamic covenant is going to be expressed to Avram by El Shaddai, who is also referred to in this passage as Elohim. And so we see Elohim and El Shaddai being one and the same. Well, this is kind of interesting, because when we talk about Elohim and El Shaddai, this can be so because this is a title and not a name. And so we understand this is a title and not a name, then we can begin to see that this is understandable, because now you're talking about Elohim in a certain perspective. Okay, so Shaddai, El Shaddai. Now, this comes from the primitive root Shaddad, and it means to be burly, powerful, passively impregnable, by implication to ravage, to destroy, to oppress, to waste. Well, that's Strong's approach to the word. But Shaddad and Shaddai comes from the idea that the Creator would say enough to creation. And so we see this in really two aspects of the word. One is Dayenu. It would be enough for us, Dayenu. And the other is Shah, which is the mark of salvation. So salvation in enough. And so Shaddai is this concept of that we see the aspect of Yah saying enough to creation. In other words, El Shaddai, it denotes he who stopped creating after he had created for 6 days. The hand closed, the hand of creation closed, and said, this is enough. So by this, we understand that the universe is, in fact, finite. Now, there's two reasons you can believe that the universe is finite, because Scripture begins with in the beginning. That is to say that the universe had a starting point. Therefore, it has an ending point. That which precedes the universe is the Creator, and the Creator has no starting point and no ending point. But the creation does have a starting point, and it has an ending point. And the volume of the creation is going to take place over a period of 6 days, which may in fact be 6,000 years, or 6 other epochs of which we do not understand. And in this creation, everything from soup to nuts was created, and at the end of it, Yah said enough. And this is the moniker El Shaddai. Now, when we see this here, we see this idea of Abraham being told, okay, well, look, I want you to walk before me and be perfect. Well, when you look at this word perfect, we see the word tamim. Now, this is very interesting. This word, I find this word to be really quite interesting in the Hebrew. If I had a whiteboard here, I would be able to show you more precisely. But what you see here is you see the spelling tav, mem, yod, mem, safit. Now, mem, yod, mem, safit is the word for water, water. And when you see the word water, this is actually a prefix as well, because the mem in mem, yod, mem is actually a prefix meaning from. So the prefix from, and then the last two letters are yam, the sea. So mayim is from the sea, mayim. And when you see the word shamayim, this is the heavens, this is the chaos, if you will, or the system, the process of that which comes from the sea. So shamayim actually describes the cycle of precipitation more than it does the heavens. It's more of the cycle of precipitation. So here, now when you see the tav at the beginning of the word, the tav is yet another Hebrew prefix, the tav meaning you shall. So when you see the aleph is I will be, and the tav is you shall. And for instance, when you look at the Ten Commandments, you see lo tana'af, thou shalt not. The lo comes before the tav, but the tav is thou shalt, and then you inject the lo, not, then whatever it is, na'af, in this case, break wedlock, thou shalt not break wedlock, but the thou shalt is all couched in this prefix, the tav prefix. And here we see the word tamaim. So literally this means you shall be water. Okay? So when we see this says, well, okay, well, this means as a noun to have integrity, to be truthful, to be without blemish, to be complete, full, perfect, sincere, to be sound, to be without spot, to be undefiled, to be upright, to be whole. Well, you can see that if you're talking about, pure water, I think that's how the Western song used to go. No, it was cool water. That was it. But when you talk about pure water, you're talking about the essential H2O. You're talking about with no contaminant in it whatsoever. So this is what it's talking about. Be uncontaminated, undefiled water, without blemish, without spot, without, additives, without chemicals, without fluoride, without particulate, without saline, without, any of that. Pure, just pure, complete, only H2O. Be pure water. That's what is being described here when he says, walk before me and be perfect. So when you're thinking about the idea, when you hear Yah say, be holy for I am holy, it's very interesting because this phrase holy, like this word perfect, when you see perfect, we have our idea of perfect is, without imperfection. I mean, I guess that's one way of understanding it, without imperfection, right? But what do we think about this idea of perfect? Well, we can't have any mistakes, right? Perfect is without mistakes. Is it? Is perfect without mistakes? No, perfect is undefiled. Perfect is, and so if you were talking about be thou perfect in your body, well, you're talking about keeping all that causes a blemish in the body, that causes the body to be defiled, that causes the body to be unnatural. Well, gee, I've got this chemical in there, I've got that chemical in there, I've got this, I've got that. Those kinds of things create an imperfect body. And what the scripture is telling Abraham is, be you perfect. Just be pure water. Don't be these other things. Okay. Same thing when you talk about holy, which is, typically Kodesh, right? Kodesh. And when we talk about Kodesh, this means a sacred place or thing, rarely abstract, sanctity, consecrated thing, dedicated thing, hallowed thing, holiness, holy, saint or sanctuary, right? But this comes from the primitive root kadash. Now, kadash means to make, pronounce, or observe as clean. Clean. So when you see Yah say, I am holy, be holy for I am holy, what Yah is saying, clean, be thee therefore clean, right? Be pronounced, be observed, be causatively clean, be consecrated, dedicated, be hallowed, as holy. But when we're talking about being holy, what is sanctified? Sanctified, somebody come along sprinkling holy water on you, or somebody calling you holy, or, acting like you have holy actions. No, holy is to be clean, And clean, of course, is another word for, not to be without blemish. So, for instance, when you're talking about a drug addict getting clean, what does that mean when he gets clean? Well, it means he doesn't have any of those drugs in his system anymore. It's not that you quit smoking marijuana for a day, because the marijuana is in your system for 11 days. But you become clean on day 12 when all of the residue is completely out of your system. So when you see the idea of be holy for I am holy, really what he is saying is be clean for I am clean. And this means to be ceremonially clean, to be morally clean, to be physically clean, to be spiritually clean, to be clean in your bloodstream, to be clean in your mind, right? And so he says, okay, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be perfect, be without blemish, be water, be in the condition of pure water. And I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly. Okay, again, we have to talk about this word covenant, because this covenant is going to become, this is a word that is really kind of critical to any understanding of Scripture. And this is the word Brit. Some people say Brit, but it is Brit. And Brit is what? It is in the sense of cutting a compact made by passing between the fleshes, a confederacy, a covenant, a league. Better to understand it as a compact, a covenant, a contract, an agreement. Now, the difference between Yah's covenant and a contract is that in a contract, you have mutuality, you have consideration, you have back and forth. I get value, you get value, and then we agreed to exchange these values in terms of an agreement. But the compact between Abraham and Yah is different, because Yah is telling Abraham, I'm going to make this covenant with you. And covenant is going to be made with you, and you're going to be a father of many nations, and your name isn't going to be Abraham anymore. Abraham, it's going to be Abraham. And a father of many nations, I am making you. Well, that's kind of interesting too, isn't it? That we would see that that in this covenant, this is a covenant that's made irrespective of what Abraham does. I'm sorry, Abraham, this is given to you. That's the way it is. You got this covenant. That's it. So when we talk about the covenant, let's look at what the covenant is. It is a twofold covenant. One aspect of the covenant is, I will make you the father of many nations. Now here the word is melo goyim. So when you talk about being a child of Abraham, you are melo goyim. Okay? Abraham is the father of the melo goyim. I will make you the father of many nations, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come out of you. And after I do this, I will establish my covenant between me and you, and your seed after you in their generation, for an everlasting covenant. Okay, so here, this covenant is going to go, in fact, First Chronicles represents it this way. A covenant was made with Abraham, which became an oath to Yitzchak, which became a law unto Yaakov, and an everlasting covenant to the house of Yasharel. Right? So it was a covenant, Brit, to Abraham. It was a Sheva to Yitzchak. It was Chok to Yaakov. And it was a Brit Olam to the seed of Yasharel. Okay. And I will give to you and your seed after you at the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. So the covenant is, you're going to be the father of many nations, and it's going to pass to your generations, and I'm going to give you the promised land, and it too is going to pass to your generations as an everlasting possession. And the large promise, I will be their Elohim. Now, why would the land of Canaan be given to Abraham as an everlasting possession? Well, there's two reasons. One is we see that we talked about before that there was a curse placed on Canaan because of the actions of Ham. Now, this is a difficult question when you ask, okay, well, if Ham saw his father's nakedness, then why on earth would Canaan be cursed? Well, part of the reason is that you have to understand that the book of Leviticus tells us what it means when the phrase says, you have uncovered your father's nakedness. That means that you have had relations with your father's wife. So this is what happened in the case of Abraham being drunk, is that Ham had relations with Noah's wife. And Noah's wife was, we believe, Naamah, even though the book of Jubilees says that his wife's name was Zara, and we believe that is actually Zerach, and which means it's not a name, it is a title. Zarach means the mother of your seed. The mother of your seed, Zarach, the mother of your seed. The name is Naamah, that's given to us in the book of Yashar. And so Naamah, who was the last survivor of the line of Cain, is going to be the mother of Noah's children. But where we get into an anomaly is when Ham has a relationship with a Naamah, he uncovers his father's nakedness, he has a relationship with Naamah, and as a result, the scripture doesn't tell us this, but you can reason, why is the curse given on Canaan? Because Canaan was the progeny of that transgression. And that progeny, by the way, carried with it a connotation that we could say is what you might call a tear connotation. That is to say, there was an inordinate DNA in Naamah that may not have been triggered in Ham or in Shem or in Japheth, but was triggered in the incestuous relationship between Ham and Naamah. And so when and assuming that did happen, and Canaan being the progeny, Canaan had triggered some DNA event that caused Canaan to be anomalous, and that DNA event could have been a latent reptilian seed, a latent seed of the waters present in Naamah. Remember that when you go back and you look at the discussion prior to the flood, it says all of mankind was tainted save Noah and his sons. Now, when you look at the line of Cain through Lamech, let's just review that story for just a minute, because Yashar gives us the story on Lamech that is quite interesting, because Yashar tells us that Lamech went out hunting with Tubal-Cain, who was the 8th generation from Cain, Lamech being the 7th generation from Cain, Lamech's sister Naamah, and he's out with Tubal-Cain, and they're hunting, and Tubal-Cain says, oh, look, there's a deer, and Lamech shoots an arrow and kills Cain. And when he realizes that he's killed his patriarch, he beats Tubal-Cain to death. So the passage that describes this in Genesis is one sentence, that he killed a man and hurt another man to his death. And so one sentence does not tell you the whole story, but Yashar tells you the whole story of exactly what happened. So Cain, who had been marked to protect him sevenfold, 7 times from anyone killing him, is actually a metaphor for the fact that Cain would see 7 generations of progeny in his lifetime and would only die upon the urging of the person from the 8th generation. Now, Naamah would be the sister of Lamech. So we know that everybody else other than Noah is going to have some kind of watcher taint. Remember that there were Nephilim, Naphalim, and Eliud, Raphaim. There were different species of giants depending on how many generations they were down. In other words, when you have a watcher having a relationship, a Ben Elohim having a relationship with Ben Adam, then a Nephilim is born, a giant is born. When that giant has relations with another giant, well, something smaller is born. A Raphaim or an Eliud is born. And when they have relations, something smaller is born still. But nonetheless, it's possible that the latency in the DNA, like for instance, a triple helix DNA, one helix of which was latent in Naamah, but which was triggered from the incest, may have been found in Canaan. Now, so Canaan being cursed by Noah, Canaan rebelled also from the land grant during the time of Peleg, and he did not accept the land that was given to him, which I believe was in Western Africa. Now, there may be a number of reasons why he didn't do that, because Western Africa may have been the situs of the Ben Elohim, and he was simply not welcome there. So Canaan instead takes the land to the south of Cush and occupies this land. It's otherwise unoccupied, and it didn't belong to him. So he is a squatter on land that doesn't belong to him. And El Shaddai says, this is the land I had always intended for you, but Canaan just showed up there and happened to butt in where he didn't belong. Okay, so returning to chapter 17, verse 9, and Elohim said to El Abraham, you shall guard my covenant, therefore, you and your seed after you in their generations. This is my covenant that you shall guard. Okay, what is that covenant? Between me and you and your seed after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. All right, well, this is a big term, and we're going to have to take a look at that, because I think that, the idea that this means cutting of the flesh of the foreskin may not be justified by the term circumcised, because the term there is mul, okay, to cut short, to curtail, by implication, to blunt, figuratively to destroy, to circumcise, to cut down in pieces, to destroy. All right, but when you talk about this idea of curtailing, there is the possibility that this curtailing the circumcision of the foreskin was actually a spiritual curtailing of sexuality. In other words, what is being taught here is that every male child must bring their sexuality under subjection. They must curtail it. They must curtail the parameters of it. Okay. And you shall circumcise at the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Well, now let's just take that and let's use the word curtail. Okay. And let's see how this plays out. Every male child among you shall be curtailed. Well, what does that mean? You shall curtail at the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be curtailed among you, every male child in your generations, that is born in the house, or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of your seed. In other words, it doesn't make any difference if you're talking about a slave, a bondservant, or your own kin. Everybody is to be circumcised. He that is born in your house, and he that is bought with your money. You see, this is telling you that Abraham was buying slaves, okay? Must need to be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Now, again, when you look at the, metaphysically at the concept of curtailing the foreskin as compared to cutting the foreskin, all right? But let's just assume that it's a cut, because when you talk about the cutting that Moses' wife does to Moses' son, that's a completely different word. That's not mul at all. That's a different word that is being used there that actually means to cut. Okay, let's continue. Verse 15. And Elohim said to El Abraham, as for Sarai, your woman, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. So here we see now that both Abraham has a he added to his name, and Sarai has a he added to her name. What is this? Well, this is the imbuement of the Ruach HaKodesh. The he, representative of the breath of Yahweh. The breath of Yahweh is now permanently upon Sarai and permanently upon Avram. Remember that Yahweh appeared to El Avram. This is what verse 17:1 says. Yahweh appeared to El Avram and said, I am the creator of the universe. I am El Shaddai, who said enough to the creation. But he said to him, right? And in saying to Avram, he breathed at Avram. And he breathed at Avram. And he said, okay, your name shall no longer be Avram, but your name shall be Avraham. Avraham. And the breath of Yahweh is in and upon Avram to the point that he is named Avram with the breath of Yahweh. And your wife Sarai is now going to be Sarah with the breath of Yahweh. And I will bless her and give you a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born to him that is 100 years old? Remember, he's 99 years old when Yah appeared to him. And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear? Interesting, Sarah is 10 years younger than Abraham. And Abraham said to Elohim, oh, that Yishmael might live before you, right? Abraham now is going to plead to Elohim that, oh, don't bless some new child. We already have a child, Yishmael. He's my son. Why don't you bless him? Give him the covenant. Let's do it that way. And Elohim said, Sarah, your woman, shall bear you a son. Indeed, and you shall call his name Yitzchak, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him, which would be, of course, Yaakov. And as for Yishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation, Melo Goyim. But my covenant will I establish with Yitzchak, which Sarah shall bear to you at this time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and Elohim went up from Abraham. Now, well, if he's going to bless Yishmael, with 12 princes shall he beget and make him a great nation, and he's going to multiply him exceedingly. Well, isn't that part of the covenant to Abraham? Did not he promise the covenant to Abraham that he was going to multiply his seed exceedingly? Isn't that the promise? And then this promise is now being given to Ishmael. So what part of the covenant is going to be established with Yitzchak? Well, there's only two aspects left of the covenant. One is the possession of the Holy Land, and the other is that Yah would be his Elohim. Those are the two aspects of remaining in the Abrahamic covenant that is going to transfer to Yitzchak as an oath. And Abraham took Ishmael, his son, and yet all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day, as Elohim had said to him. And Abram was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the self same day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house, bought with the money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. Okay, so now this is going to conclude our reading of chapter 18 in the book of Genesis.